Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going to tackle cancer, or more specifically, The Emperor of All Maladies, the Pulitzer Prize-winning book by Siddhartha Mukherjee.
Yeah, it's a pretty hefty book, so we'll see how deep we can dive.
Right.
But I think it'll be worth it.
So this book is kind of unique because it tells the history of cancer, almost as if cancer itself is a character in a giant historical drama.
Exactly. And what I find fascinating is that even thousands of years ago, ancient civilizations had encounters with this disease. You know, like there's an Egyptian mummy out there with evidence of bone cancer. Crazy to think about, right?
Yeah, thousands of years ago. It really puts into perspective how long humans have been grappling with this disease.
Absolutely. But for a long time, people didn't really understand what cancer was or how to treat it.
Right, like how did they explain it back then?
Well, for centuries, the prevailing theory was based on the ancient Greek physician Galen. He thought that illnesses, including cancer, were caused by an imbalance of these four humors in the body blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile.
Black bile.
Yeah, black bile was associated with melancholy and, darker emotions, and they thought cancer was a result of too much black bile accumulating in a particular area.
Oh, wow. So what do they do about it?
Well, with this theory, surgery wasn't really seen as a viable option because they thought even if you cut out the tumor, the black bile would just keep flowing back like sap from a tree.
Oh, I see. They thought it was like a fluid imbalance.
Exactly. And this belief actually held back surgical treatments for cancer for centuries.
It's amazing how much these early theories shaped medical practices. It wasn't really until the 19th century, with the advent of things like antisepsis and anesthesia, that surgery started to become a more realistic option for treating cancer.
Absolutely. These breakthroughs were game changers. They allowed surgeons to perform more complex and invasive procedures. It was around this time that the radical mastectomy, the removal of the entire breast and surrounding tissue, became a widely accepted treatment for breast cancer.
Wow. I know that procedure has a really controversial history.
Yeah, it does. It was championed by this influential surgeon named William Halsted, who really believed it was the best way to prevent the cancer from spreading. But over time, its effectiveness was really questioned, and eventually, rigorous clinical trials showed that it didn't really offer a significant survival advantage over less radical approaches.
So even though this was a major advancement in surgery, it also highlighted the importance of evidence-based medicine, right?
Exactly. You can't just rely on assumptions or a single surgeon's strong beliefs. You need data from carefully designed studies to determine if a treatment truly works.
So while surgery was developing, another branch of cancer treatment was also emerging: chemotherapy.
Right, chemotherapy. Sidney Farber, this amazing physician and researcher, was a pioneer in using chemicals to treat cancer.
And he mainly focused on childhood leukemia, right?
Yes. And this was a huge deal because back then, a diagnosis of leukemia in a child was pretty much a death sentence. There was very little that could be done.
So how did he approach it?
Farber thought that if cancer cells were growing so rapidly, maybe he could use chemicals to interfere with that growth.
Makes sense.
And he actually had some early success with the drug called aminopterin.
What was that like?
Well, it wasn't a cure, but it did show, for the first time, that chemicals could be used to actually push leukemia into remission.
Wow. That must have been groundbreaking.
It was. It sparked this whole new era of cancer research focused on finding and developing more effective chemotherapy drugs.
I've heard about the Jimmy Fund. Was that connected to Farber's work?
Oh, absolutely. The Jimmy Fund was and still is this incredible fundraising effort that Farber started to support his research at Children's Hospital in Boston.
And Jimmy was?
Einar Gustafsson. He was a young boy with leukemia. And Farber made this really bold decision to, put Jimmy's story front and center in this national fundraising campaign.
And that really helped to bring childhood cancer into the public consciousness?
Right. It did. And not only did it raise much-needed funds for research, it also brought this, hope and a human face to a disease that was often shrouded in fear and despair.
That's so powerful.
Yeah, it was a real turning point.
So, we've talked about surgery and chemotherapy, but then the 1970s saw this big push for a war on cancer.
Right, the war on cancer. And that's a whole other chapter in this story.
It really was. This was during the Nixon administration, and it led to a massive increase in funding for cancer research and this very ambitious goal of finding a cure.
It was like the moon landing of cancer research.
Yeah.
Everyone was focused on finding the magic bullet, the cure that would eradicate cancer once and for all.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of President Kennedy's speech when he set the goal of landing a man on the moon.
Exactly. There was this sense of national urgency and optimism.
Did it work?
Well, it's complicated. The war on cancer definitely accelerated research and led to some important discoveries.
Like what?
Well, one big advancement was the development of combination chemotherapy. It's the idea of using multiple drugs, often with different mechanisms of action, to attack cancer cells from different angles.
Sounds like a good strategy.
It was for some cancers, but it also came with like a whole host of really harsh side effects for patients.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And ultimately, it didn't live up to the hype of being the cure-all that everyone had hoped for.
Right, because it turns out that cancer is incredibly complex. It's not just one disease, but a collection of hundreds of different diseases, each with its own unique characteristics.
Yeah, and that realization was a bit of a humbling moment for the field.
I can imagine. So if there's no magic bullet, how did researchers shift gears? Where did they go from there?
Well, they started to realize that to really make progress, they needed to understand what causes cancer in the first place.
Makes sense. So what were some of the big breakthroughs in that area?
One major development was the field of epidemiology, which looks at the patterns, causes, and effects of diseases in populations.
Epidemiology. What kind of research does that involve?
Well, for example, groundbreaking studies in epidemiology showed the link between smoking and lung cancer.
That's huge.
It was a game changer. It showed that lifestyle choices could actually contribute to cancer development.
And it led to all sorts of public health campaigns, right? Like warnings on cigarette packs and efforts to reduce smoking rates.
Exactly. It was a major shift in thinking about cancer, moving from a purely treatment-focused approach to one that also emphasized prevention.
Prevention. I've heard about this test called the Ames test. Does that have something to do with cancer prevention?
Absolutely. The Ames test was developed by a brilliant scientist named Bruce Ames.
What does it do?
It's a way to test whether a substance is a carcinogen, meaning it has the potential to cause cancer. It basically looks at whether the substance can cause mutations in bacteria.
Mutations. Aren't those changes in DNA?
Yes. And we now know that mutations in our DNA can accumulate over time and sometimes lead to cancer. So the Ames test is like this early warning system to identify potentially harmful substances in our environment.
It's like a detective tool for cancer prevention.
Exactly. And it's been incredibly valuable in identifying and regulating all sorts of carcinogens, from industrial chemicals to pesticides and even some ingredients in consumer products.
So we're starting to see this shift from just treating cancer to also trying to prevent it in the first place.
Yeah. And while we were learning more about external causes of cancer, there was this other revolution happening in our understanding of the disease itself. This revolution focused on the internal workings of our cells and the discovery of oncogenes.
Oncogenes.
These are genes that can actually drive the development of cancer. It's like they have the power to turn a normal, healthy cell into a cancerous one.
Oh, wow. So the enemy is within.
In a way, yes. This was a huge turning point in cancer research. We went from this idea of cancer being caused by some external invader, like a virus or a toxin, to realizing that the seeds of cancer could actually be within our own cells, within our own DNA.
That's both fascinating and a little scary, isn't it? The idea that we could be carrying these potential time bombs within us.
It is. But it's also incredibly empowering because it opens up whole new avenues for treatment and prevention. If we can understand how these oncogenes work, maybe we can find ways to target them and shut them down.
It's like finding the master switch that controls cancer's growth.
Exactly. And that's what a lot of current cancer research is focused on.
So, how does that work? How do you target these genes?
Well, one way is through targeted therapies, which are drugs designed to specifically target the molecules involved in cancer growth. It's like using a guided missile to precisely attack the cancer cells while leaving healthy cells relatively unharmed.
That's amazing. But it sounds incredibly complex.
It is. Each type of cancer can have its own unique set of genetic changes, so finding the right target and the right drug for each patient is a major challenge.
I've also heard about tumor suppressor genes. Are those related to oncogenes?
They are. Tumor suppressor genes are like the brakes on a car. They normally help to keep cell growth in check and prevent uncontrolled proliferation. But if these genes are damaged or mutated, the brakes can fail, and cells can start to grow uncontrollably.
So it's this delicate balance between the oncogenes pushing for growth and the tumor suppressor genes trying to keep things under control.
Precisely. And when that balance is disrupted, cancer can develop.
It's like this intricate dance between these different genes and pathways within ourselves. It's incredible to think about how much we've learned, but also how much we still have to discover.
You're absolutely right. The field of cancer research is constantly evolving.
And this book, The Emperor of All Maladies, really takes us on that journey, doesn't it? It shows how much progress we've made, but also how far we still have to go in our understanding and treatment of this disease.
It definitely does. And I think that's one of the things that makes it such a compelling read.
And it's a reminder that the fight against cancer is a marathon, not a sprint. It requires ongoing research, collaboration, and a willingness to challenge our assumptions and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Absolutely. And that's why we're here today, diving deep into this fascinating and complex topic.
Right. And we've only just scratched the surface of the Emperor of All Maladies. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore even more groundbreaking discoveries, the rise of personalized medicine, and the exciting future of cancer treatment.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
You know, it's wild. Like, all this research into cancer has kind of forced us to learn more about the human body itself.
Oh, yeah.
You've gone from those ancient ideas, about like the humors and stuff,
Right.
to this crazy world of cells and genes and all these tiny little molecules that control everything.
It's like we keep getting a more and more powerful microscope and seeing things we never even imagined before.
Totally. And one of the things we've realized is that cancer isn't always caused by something outside of us attacking our bodies.
Right, not like a bacteria or a virus or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes the problem is actually coming from inside. Like, our own genes can go haywire and start causing cancer.
That's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah, it is a bit, but it's also led to some really important advances like screening tests.
Oh, right, like mammograms and pap smears.
Exactly. Those tests can help us catch certain cancers early on when they're usually much easier to treat.
Early detection is so important.
It really is. It can be a game changer in terms of survival rates.
But I guess it's not always simple, right? There's been a lot of debate about the pros and cons of some screening tests.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like mammograms in particular.
There are definitely some nuances and things to consider.
Right, it's not just black and white.
Exactly. And it just highlights how complex cancer really is.
Yeah. And on that note, the discovery of oncogenes really blew things wide open.
Oncogenes, those are like the bad guys of the cell, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
They're the genes that can tell a normal, healthy cell to start acting like a cancer cell.
Wow, it's like they have this power to flip a switch and turn a cell rogue.
It's a good way to put it. And what's even crazier is that every single tumor can have its own unique set of these oncogenes that are driving its growth.
So it's like each cancer is its own unique enemy with its own set of weapons.
Exactly. And that's why finding a single cure for all cancers is probably not realistic.
Makes sense.
We need to understand the specific oncogenes driving each individual cancer to develop targeted treatments.
So personalized medicine is the way to go.
I think so, and that's where the Cancer Genome Project is really paving the way.
Right, that's the massive project to map out all the genes involved in cancer.
Exactly. It's like creating a detailed blueprint of each cancer so we can understand its strengths and weaknesses.
That's a great analogy. It's like you're saying we need to know the enemy's battle plans before we can defeat them.
Right. But here's the thing. There are tons of genetic changes in a tumor, but not all of them are actually important for its growth.
So how do researchers know which ones to focus on?
That's where they have to figure out which mutations are the drivers and which ones are just passengers.
Drivers and passengers?
Yeah, think of it like a car.
Okay.
The driver mutations are like the engine and the steering wheel.
Right.
They're essential for the car to run and go where it wants to go. Those are the mutations that are directly fueling the cancer's growth and spread.
Oh, I see.
But then you have these other mutations that are like dents and scratches on the car.
Ah, okay.
They might be there, but they don't really affect how the car functions.
They're just along for the ride.
Exactly. So researchers are working hard to identify those key driver mutations because those are the ones we need to target with treatments.
So it's like finding the Achilles heel of each cancer.
Exactly. But it's not always easy. Some cancers are genetically simpler than others.
Really?
Yeah, like acute lymphoblastic leukemia, it tends to have fewer driver mutations, which might be why it's often treatable with chemotherapy.
Oh, that makes sense.
But then you have cancers like pancreatic cancer. Oh man, those have a much more complex genetic landscape.
Oh, wow. So that makes them harder to treat.
Way harder.
Yeah.
Because there are just so many potential targets and it's hard to know which ones to hit.
So I guess the more we learn about the genetics of cancer, the more we realize how complex and varied it is.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. There's always another layer underneath.
So if every cancer is so different, what does that mean for the future of treatment?
Well, I think it points toward a more personalized approach, where treatments are tailored to each individual's tumor.
Right, instead of just using the same approach for everyone with the same type of cancer?
Exactly. We need to be smarter about how we use treatments.
And that involves understanding the unique genetic makeup of each tumor.
Definitely. We need to know what's driving each cancer's growth so we can hit it with the right weapon.
Makes sense. So it's not just about finding new drugs, but also about using the ones we have in a more strategic way.
Absolutely. And of course, prevention is always key. If we can prevent cancer from developing in the first place, that's the best outcome.
Yeah, prevention is definitely the ideal scenario. But for people who are already facing cancer, this idea of personalized medicine gives me hope.
Me too. I think we're on the cusp of some really exciting breakthroughs.
Yeah, the Emperor of All Maladies has been a real eye-opener. I had no idea how far we've come in our understanding of cancer.
It's a pretty incredible story.
It really is, and it makes you realize how important ongoing research is.
Absolutely. We still have so much to learn, but I'm optimistic about the future.
Me too. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive.
They have.
But there's still so much more to explore in the Emperor of All Maladies. In the next part, we'll delve into the world of immunotherapy and discuss what the future might hold for cancer treatment.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
You know, it's amazing to think about all the progress that's been made in cancer research, but it's also kind of mind-blowing how complex it all is.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But even with all that complexity, researchers are still coming up with these incredible new strategies, like immunotherapy.
Immunotherapy, yeah.
That's like the really hot topic these days, right?
It's huge. It's this whole new way of thinking about cancer treatment.
So what's the basic idea behind it?
Well, instead of directly attacking the cancer cells with things like surgery or chemo or radiation immunotherapy, it's all about harnessing the power of our own immune systems.
Oh, so we're basically using our body's natural defenses to fight the cancer.
Exactly.
That's pretty awesome.
It is, and it's shown some really amazing results for cancers that were historically super difficult to treat.
Like what kind of cancers?
Well, melanoma, for example,
Oh, wow.
and certain types of lung cancer, and even some blood cancers.
So how does it actually work? Like, how do you get the immune system to attack cancer cells?
Well, one way is with these drugs called checkpoint inhibitors.
Checkpoint inhibitors.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird name. But basically, our immune systems have these built-in checkpoints that prevent them from going into overdrive and attacking our own healthy cells.
That makes sense. We don't want our immune systems going rogue.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But sometimes those checkpoints can also prevent the immune system from recognizing and attacking cancer cells.
Oh, I see.
So these checkpoint inhibitor drugs basically release the brakes on the immune system.
Ah, so it can go after those cancer cells full force.
Exactly. It's like giving your immune system superpowers.
But I'm guessing there are some risks involved too, right?
Uh-huh.
Like what happens if the immune system gets too revved up?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Immunotherapy isn't without its side effects. Sometimes the immune system can start attacking healthy tissues, which can lead to autoimmune problems.
Oh, wow. So it's like a delicate balance.
It really is. And not everyone responds to immunotherapy either.
So there's still a lot of research to be done.
Definitely. We're still trying to figure out why some people benefit from it and others don't.
Yeah, it seems like with all these advancements in cancer genetics and targeted therapies and now immunotherapy, we're moving towards this era of personalized medicine where treatments are tailored to each individual patient.
Totally. I think that's where the future of cancer treatment is headed.
Pretty exciting.
It is. But it's also important to remember that prevention is still key.
Right. We can't just rely on treatments. We need to find ways to stop cancer from developing in the first place.
Absolutely. Lifestyle choices like diet and exercise and avoiding things like smoking can make a huge difference.
Yeah, those are things we can all do to reduce our risk.
Exactly. And the Emperor of Our Maladies does a really good job of highlighting that.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey through the history of cancer and all the twists and turns along the way.
It really has. It's a story of incredible scientific discoveries, but also of human resilience and the determination to find better ways to fight this disease.
And it makes you realize that the fight is far from over.
Definitely not. There's still so much more to learn and so many challenges ahead.
But I think the Emperor of All Maladies gives us hope.
I agree. It shows how far we've come and how much progress is possible when brilliant minds come together to tackle a problem.
So if you're interested in learning more about the fascinating history of cancer and the incredible advancements that have been made, we highly recommend checking out The Emperor of All Maladies by Siddhartha Mukherjee.
It's a truly eye-opening book.
And that's it for this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into fascinating topics. And remember to leave us a review if you enjoyed the show and to tell a friend about this episode. We'll see you next time.